So we began speaking last week that simcha, joy, the word joy in Hebrew is simcha, is essential in serving God. I began by sharing with you that joy is part of healthy life. To succeed in life, to live longer, to socialize, you must have joy. But the Rebbe is talking about serving God purely from the point of view of serving God. You cannot serve God without joy. I don't know if I mentioned last time, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, was asked what was the chidush, what was the new introduction of the Hasidic movement that was missing, was lacking. Everybody. And he answered that through joy, the Hasidim serve God better, longer, and they are connected to God to a greater degree. And that's the essence of what a Hasid is about. Joy, happiness. As we will develop this chapter alone, chapter 26, the Rabbi will give us some ideas of how to remain joyous despite great challenges. But that's soon. Right now, the Rebbe wants to make sure that we understand you cannot serve God without joy. If there is no joy, the value of serving God is very, very minimal. And the rabbi we spoke about last week, the rabbi uses the example of a match between two men who are fighting each other, trying to put down each one's opponent. They will not be measured, or the prediction of who is going to win is not necessarily who has more training, more mass, more bigger muscles, but who is more motivated, who has energy. If one of the two had a lot of drinking last night and he has no idea why does he have to win, because he already has fame and he's very hard to move around, even though he has all the tools that are needed to succeed, he may lose, because it's all about the spirit, the joy that gives us life. And therefore, it is the evil inclination, our opponent, the soul that is created to put us down and separate us from God, does not come and say, don't pray. It just say, pray, but you're tired anyway. Go and take a drink, relax. You don't have to do all of it. In other words, makes us feel lazy and slow. And I should tell you, the exact same thing happens in relationship between husband and wife, siblings, family. It all starts from a small change of lack of energy. And it leads to a war that takes place in court. With us and God, if I am not joyous, the evil inclination has entered me and has taken me away from God. So if I get up in the morning and I say, today is not my day, if I get up in the morning today and I say, today I'm going to take it easy, I'm not going to do much because I want to take, I don't have much energy, I should know, at least knowing right now, before we learn the techniques, knowing that the evil inclination is taking over me. In order for him to put me to the bench, to fight me and to punch me to the floor, is making me feel lazy or drowsy or drained. And this way, he is able to overcome. Now, the second part we studied is the rabbi brings us from the Talmud, I'm sorry, not the Talmud, Proverbs, that in every sadness there should be profit. Says the Rebbe, it doesn't say there is profit, but there will be profit. That's the verse in Proverbs. In other words, the positive, the profit, meaning the gaining, the reward is only in the future. And I shared with you an example of antibiotics, or for example, an operation. The actual cutting into the flesh is no good. Actually can cause a lot of infection, cause a lot of weakness and pain. However, the goal is that the operation should cure the person so he is able to live a better life in the future. Antibiotics is poison. It puts in bacteria in my body. But the purpose of that bacteria is to prevent or to kill a much stronger bacteria that we have no other way of getting rid of. In other words, medicine today is based on the idea that I take something and I do something that's bad, that hurts, that's not healthy, for the sake of the future, the reward for the future that will be a better future. Sadness does exist. How do we know it exists? So I started sharing with you last week. We went through it very quick. In our lifespan, in our life cycle, we face lots of challenges. The loss of a close one, events that take place, losing my job, being, rejected, rejection. There is all kinds. We are going to talk about 5 categories that bring sadness into the human. But in general speaking, in general terms, sadness is part and parcel of the DNA of humanity, of the universe. In other words, you cannot just say, don't ever be sad. We cannot say, we erase sadness from your life. It's just not going to work. In addition, I shared with you that in the calendar, the Jewish year, the calendar of the year, you will find many events that are serious and some are sad. For example, the 3 sad weeks, the month of Av, the 3 sad weeks that culminate in the 9th of Av, which is a very sad day. You have serious times, the month of Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur are not such a joyous occasion. We do not say the Hallel on Rosh Chodesh, which is Rosh Hashanah, because it's a serious time. But if you pay attention, as I said last time, every time after a serious or a sad day, there will be a much happier day. So if you have a month of sadness, Av, you have a month of very happy time, Adar. Purim is the happiest day of the year. After a full year of great sadness, the entire Jewish nation was under the fear that they're going to be annihilated. So in other words, the joy will come after sadness, and we'll discuss it in great details. So Rosh Hashanah is very serious. Yom Kippur, 10 days later, is a very serious day. What happened after Yom Kippur? 5 days later, you have the time of our joy. Sukkot is called Zman Simchatenu. 7 days after, during Sukkot, you come to Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah, you rejoice with the Torah. So every time you have a serious or a sad point in time, after it leads to something happy, to something unusual that's greater. The same is about our life. There are moments in our life that we face great sadness, and there is no way to just ignore, close your eyes, or take a drink and forget about it. However, we need to know, as the rabbi will address this, the purpose is to gain something new that otherwise you would have not. And that's the second point the rabbi is going to make. The third point the rabbi is going to make, which we're about to get to study, is that just like darkness is an absolute necessity to appreciate light. Without darkness, according to Kabbalah, darkness is actually part of light. In other words, when God created light, he created darkness together, not as a curse, but actually to benefit from light, you must have darkness. If you do not have darkness, if we didn't have darkness, we would never appreciate light. Only when the sunset goes and then it's dark, you can't wait for the morning. You can only do your handyman work, or whatever it is you do, because you have light, you have daylight, you appreciate the sun. In other words, without darkness, you didn't appreciate light. That's the reason we have sadness and events that are very, very painful or hurtful, because they are for the purpose of bringing out the positive and the blessing of the good. That's the third point the rabbi is going to make. Hopefully we'll cover this entire topic today. The next topic, it's all in chapter 26. It's an introduction to what we're going to get into much more details. The second third of this chapter, the rabbi is going to talk about how do we make sure that we rejoice. It's easy said. How do if I lost my job or my spouse wants to divorce me, how do you expect me to be happy? What do you mean? Okay, let's say it's an absolute necessity, but to make it a happy occasion, a happy moment in my life, that's a little bit out of the box, so to say. And that's the other part the rabbi is going to talk about. I shared with you last week the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Chabad Rebbe, and the Cantonists. I found a comics. I came home and I told my children, do we have the book about the Cantonists? So right away, Ari found a comics, a book of comics about different stories of the Cantonists. And David was kind enough to find the translation of the Cantonist as nappers. Nappers. And that's what Cantonist is. And it's well documented, and I looked at Wikipedia, you will find lots of stories about the Cantonists. So once the third Rebbe came to St. Petersburg, he was invited to a synagogue of Cantonists. These were past soldiers that were taken apart, they were ripped off their families to be trained to become strong soldiers. And they asked the Rebbe to speak before them. And they told the Rebbe they cleaned up the synagogue and they polished all the furniture for the Rebbe's honor. And the Rebbe turned to them and said, just like you shined up your buttons and your outfit, in spirituality, you need to shine up you polish your soul. It is through shining with the tears, the water that comes from tears, and the material is the recitation of psalm. And one of the Cantonists turned to the Rebbe and he said, Rebbe, we learned in the army that you conquer a city when you go to wage war by a march, not by sadness. That's why there is a band, to encourage and to invigorate and to give us energy. And the Rebbe liked it very much, and he turned and he said, yes. And the Hasidim noticed that the Rebbe has changed his attitude since, and he's become much happier externally, expressing joy, because you serve God only with joy. Joy is the pathway to connecting to God. So I'm in the middle of page 352. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm reading on page 352. As for the verse, in every sadness there will be profit, from Proverbs, which means that some profit and advantage would be derived from it. So the first point the rabbi made is that joy is the ultimate tool to connect to God. The second point the rabbi is making is that Proverbs tell us there is benefit to sadness. The wording, there will be profit, implies that on the contrary, the sadness itself is no virtue, except that some profit will ultimately be derived from it in the future. It's a future tense. It says there will be profit, not there is. This profit is the true joy in God, which follows the truth that is justified sadness over one's sins with bitterness of soul and a broken heart, which must come at a specific suitable times. We are going to talk about that specific times. I think I shared with you, there is a place for sadness, for bitterness, for, so to say, an accounting of our conduct, but that has to be at specific time and segregated, so it should not have effect on the rest of my life. So according to the Rebbe, not the victorious is happy, but the happier become victorious. In other words, you need to switch your attitude. In order for one to be victorious, the prerequisite is to be happy. And therefore, the cause for joy, it's not being victorious, therefore I'll be happy. People say, if I win the lottery, I'll be happy. If I graduate from college, I'll be happy. Whatever, if I have so much money, if I'm whatever, it's quite opposite. If you'll be happy, you will be able to achieve and get everything you want. So the happier conquers and become victorious. Not to say that the victorious or the conqueror is happy. In other words, happiness is an attitude in our mind devoid of any condition. And I shared with you last week that besimcha, with joy, is the same letters as machshava, thought, intelligence. Because intelligence is what will make us happy. If I recognize that in simcha has nothing to do with my condition or where I find myself and what my life is about, I will be able to live with joy. And we're going to go into many details on it. Says the Rebbe, hence the profit of sadness is the joy that follows it. I'm reading on page 353. Why should this sadness lead to the worshipper to joy? For thereby through one sadness, the spirit of impurity and of the sitra achra is broken, and so too the iron wall that separates him from his Father in heaven will be removed. Says the Rebbe, sometimes sadness will bring profit, will bring a benefit. When someone is broken, that he is far from God, that he does not sense godliness in his life, it will break the person's heart so badly that it will motivate him to reconnect with God, and therefore there will be a profit, so to say, a benefit. As the Zohar comments on the verse, a broken spirit, a broken heart, you will not despise. It's a verse in Psalm. The Zohar interprets the verse as follows. A broken spirit of the sitra achra is brought about by means of a broken heart. Since sadness over one's sins causes sitra achra to be broken and the iron wall to vanish, it leads one to rejoice, as the Alter Rebbe now goes on to say. Then the preceding verses will be followed for him, will be fulfilled for him. Make me hear joy and gladness. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and support me with your generous spirit. This joy is the profit of sadness, whereas sadness itself is neither profitable nor advantageous. This is the simple reason, that is, apart from the deeper mystical ones, for the practice instituted by the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, of reciting this psalm, Psalm 51, that containing the verse quoted above, after Tikkun Chatzot, the midnight prayer, before assuming one's Torah study. We will not go into many details. All I'm going to share is chapter 51. King David is speaking about sadness and melancholy, and how his heart is totally broken. But he says that through the broken heart and the sadness, it paved the way, opened up his heart to reconnect to God and rejoice with God. Says the Rebbe, this is what it means in the Gemara, in the Talmud, or in Proverbs, that in every sadness there will be profit. Because by breaking apart his godly animal soul and removing, so to say, breaking away the iron wall that the evil is creating between us and God, it opens it up, and the profit is now I can reconnect to God. So therefore, sadness can be utilized to break the evil soul and reconnect to God. I hope you understand this. It might be a little bit esoteric, but it would lead into a much more practical point of view. In order for that one should study with a true joy in God that succeeds the remorse of Tikkun Chatzot. There was such joy is of a greater quality than joy which is not preceded by sadness, similar to the distinctive quality of light which followed darkness. As the Zohar comments, says the Rebbe, and I mentioned that before, the benefit, the positive properties of light are coming to light only after you have witnessed darkness. If there is no darkness, we will never be able to appreciate and see the positive of light. And therefore, darkness is an absolute necessity before you can enjoy light. That's the same with sadness. Sadness is the prerequisite to be able to enjoy joy and happiness. So when God gives us days of sadness, when God gives us events of sadness, it is for the benefit of joy, to be able to break them and be reconnecting with God. And as we'll see in great details, as in the Zohar comments here, I'm going to explain this point and then I'll show it you a story. As the Zohar comments on the verse, and I, King Solomon, saw that wisdom surpasses foolishness as light surpasses darkness. Note there that this will suffice for him who understands the Rabbi. King Solomon says, the wisest of all men, and you need to help me understand because it makes no sense to me. He says, I saw the benefit, or what do you say? I saw that wisdom surpasses foolishness as light surpasses darkness. Now, you have wisdom, you have a wise guy, you have foolishness, you have a foolish guy. Which one of the two you want to be? Foolish or wise? Wise, right? So King Solomon didn't know it until he saw, and he compares it to light versus darkness. He says, I saw there is benefit. I saw that benefit surpasses foolishness as light surpasses darkness. I don't understand. Light and darkness is obvious to him that light is better, right? You can see, we know you can have energy derived from light. Light is wonderful. Darkness, not so much. So that's obvious. Wise and foolish, he didn't understand. Now he saw, meaning he's deep in his thought, he discovered that wisdom has benefit over foolishness, just like light. Can anybody explain that to me? Why would I have thought that foolishness is as equal as good as wisdom, that King Solomon needs to teach us that he found the benefit of wisdom over foolishness, just like the benefit of light over darkness? Ali, do you understand the question or it's too complex? You're good? Anybody can offer an explanation?
I think he's just mentioning this. We knew it already, but why this man is just writing it down?
That would make sense, except in the Torah, every word is perfect. And King Solomon says, Veraiti, I saw, sheyesh yitaron, that there is a benefit or there is a plus to wisdom over foolishness, just like light is greater than darkness. The rabbis are asking, and that's the Rebbe's question here. The Rebbe is asking, what is this that you need King Solomon to tell us that wisdom is greater than foolishness? In addition, it's very hard to understand that he needs to illustrate by comparing it to light versus darkness. Here is the answer. You know when we appreciate wisdom? Only among foolishness. If everybody has 110 IQ, you wouldn't appreciate it. When do we appreciate it? When there is 60 and 50 and 30. Now you say, oh, this guy's wise. In other words, as somebody told me, one-eye man in the country of blind is also king. Anybody heard that?
Yeah.
One-eye person in the country of blinds is also king. In other words, the contrast is extremely important. This is what King Solomon is sharing with us. King Solomon says that wisdom is greater than foolishness, of course, because it's a plus. A foolish person has no wisdom. He's not an intelligent person. He's lacking something. A wise man has something that the foolish person don't have. So obviously he's greater. But he says, I saw that there is a benefit. In other words, there is an extra bonus to wisdom when it comes after great foolishness. Just like light will only be appreciated when it comes following darkness. Here is the Rebbe's explanation. The Zohar asks, does it take a Solomon to see this? In other words, it's obvious that wisdom versus foolishness, there is a benefit to wisdom. And it answers that the intention of the verse is that just as darkness contributes to light, for we cannot truly appreciate light unless we have experienced darkness, so does foolishness contribute to the appreciation of wisdom. Similarly, in our case, once earlier sadness adds strength to the joy which follows it. And this is the profit of sadness. Sadness itself, however, is a hindrance in one's service of God. Says the Rebbe, based on the Zohar, that the appreciation of wisdom comes only amidst foolishness. Just like, that's what King Thomas says, just like light is appreciated only when it comes after darkness. So when do we have a benefit from sadness? The benefit is the outcome, great joy. That joy without sadness would not be appreciated as much. There was a
There's a saying, you appreciate it when you lose it.
you appreciate when you lose it. Okay, thank you. The same point. There was a famous rabbi, I happen to know him, and I think some of you have heard of him, Rabbi Bamzer, Zev Bamzer. Ocean Park in Flatbush. It was your rabbi. I interacted with him for conversions. His conversion was accepted by the Rebbe. And he was speaking. Many times he would be brought to speak to the Chabad rabbis. A very, very great speaker. He was teaching us how to speak, how to deliver sermons. Rabbi Bamzer was very well-known rabbi in the Young Israel community. Was that a Young Israel? Young Israel. Very well-known synagogue. Rabbi Zev Bamzer, he died about 20 years ago. Once shared, and I believe it's on a video, his connection to the Chabad. He says he heard about the Rebbe so many times and so many occasions, he decided to walk for a Farbrengen, a gathering on Shabbat when the Rebbe teaches Torah, and listen to the Rebbe, see what the Rebbe has to say. What is the Rebbe selling? He came on a Shabbos. He said he went to a Farbrengen. He can walk from Ocean Park. It's about a 2-hour walk. I did it a few times. You can walk. So he walked to Farbrengen. He came in the afternoon. He walked in. There's hundreds of people, and the Rebbe speaks. Suddenly, the Rebbe made a joke. The Rebbe told a joke, and everybody burst in laughter. And he said, this is not for me. Torah is seriousness. Torah you have to take with as a yoke. You can't be making fun of Torah. He walked out. And he says, Chabad is not for me. That's not my life. A couple of months went by, and there was a member of his community, a female member of his community that became frum. They became Orthodox. She kept Shabbat. She learned kasher. She wanted to marry. She wanted to live a real Jewish life. And her rabbi is Rabbi Bamzer. So she kept consulting him how to change, how to make the kitchen kosher, where to put mezuzah, how to do about work on the holidays. One day the rabbi says to her, tell me, what made you become frum? So she said that she wasn't religious, she wasn't Shomer Shabbat. She was invited to spend Shabbat in Crown Heights, in the neighborhood of where the Rebbe was, a couple of months ago. And she accepted it. She was there on Shabbat, and it wasn't for her. She says, too much not to do, yet to do. And it's also, people are very serious. But then they told her the highlight of Shabbat is to be present when the Rebbe speaks. So she was upstairs in the women's section, She had no understanding of the Rebbe speaking because the Rebbe spoke in Yiddish and she didn't speak a word in Yiddish. But she said she was at a gathering and suddenly the Rebbe made a joke. And she don't know what he said, but everybody burst in laughter. And she said to herself, one moment, if these people are happy people, I want to accept that. And she explained to the Rabbi Bamzer, and she said, until now, part of the reason that held me back from connecting to the tradition is because I'm a free-spirited person. I'm a happy person. And the religious people, they seem very serious, always sad, always running around. They have no time. So that's why even when I was there for Shabbat, food was good, the hosts were nice to us, but it wasn't any meaningful. But she said when the leader, he made a joke and everybody laughing, I says, that's the kind of religious I want. And Rabbi Bamzer said, he turned to her and he says, tell me the exact date. It turned out to be the same Shabbat that he rejected. And he said to himself, if the Rebbe telling a joke, a lost soul, not knowing what the Rebbe is talking about, was so affected just by the Rebbe making a joke, then that's the man I want to follow. And that's when he became very close to Chabad. He always advocated Lubavitch. He was speaking about Chabad. He was speaking in Chabad engagements. When I was a yeshiva boy, he came to Los Angeles. Every time he would visit cities, he would come to the Chabad yeshiva or Chabad place and come and speak. So he came and spoke to us. He was a great friend of Chabad, all because his attitude changed. He wasn't brought up with the Hasidic teaching that the foundation of God's connection must be done through joy. But then God had sent to him a person that embodied how effective joy is. And that's what changed him. So if I want to serve God, I must have joy. The fact that there are moments of sadness on itself has no benefit, gains nothing good. It is only the outcome, just like light comes after darkness, brings us great joy and great benefits. How do we stay away from getting depressed and sad when we face challenges? That would be the next part of this chapter, which is only an introduction to the topics we're going to be speaking about in great details. Let's continue. The rabbi now, and therefore, furthermore, one more, because it's in this week's Torah portion. Furthermore, the verse states explicitly, because you did not serve God your Lord with joy, the punishment described in the ensuing verse will be administered, God forbid, and everyone is familiar with the explanation of the Arizal on the verse. I will share with you the explanation of the Arizal, and I think in the note he's going to explain as well. What the rabbi is saying, this week's Torah portion is one of the longest portions, and it contains curses. How many curses? 98 curses. Mothers will eat the flesh of their children. Great famine. You will be taken into the enemy and become naked slaves. Lots of very harsh punishment and curses for disobeying God. But in the midst of all that, there is one verse. It's in this week's Torah portion. If you come to synagogue, you will hear it this week. In fact, it's so depressing reading those curses that no one is called to the Torah. No one is being called to the Torah. The reader makes the blessings himself, and he reads that section, because nobody wants to be honored with those 98 curses. I think I shared with you the famous story that in Europe they couldn't find anyone to volunteer to get called to the Torah on that aliyah. It's the fourth honor. So they decided to sell it, to give money to pay somebody. So they found Shmerel, who was on the verge of homeless, and they offered them $150. And he didn't know, he says he needs more. So they offered him 180, and he accepted. Come Shabbat, they called the first, second, third. Now they're about Shmerel. They made up with him, and he's nowhere to be found. So they stopped. They had to wait. As they're waiting about 25 minutes, suddenly Shmuel is storming into the synagogue, all sweating, all tired. And he said, Shmuel, we made up. We offered to pay you. You're holding the entire congregation for half an hour. And Shmuel turned to them and says, what do you think? I can make a living from one? I'm going all over town in all synagogue. He's making a living, you know. So there is always the Jewish ingenuity to come up with a way of making a living. So anyway, this is an entire section with a lot of curses. Nobody wants to be called to the Torah, except that. So in the Hasidic community, is the Torah reader reads it, and he's called. He himself goes without being called. In the middle of the 98 curses, there is a one line. All that will befall you because you did not serve God with joy from amidst all the blessings God had given you. Now, the way I read it is the way the Zohar explains it. It can be read a little different, as you will bring in a note, I'm sure, but just a minute. In other words, joy, the lack of joy is not a sin, but it brings so much separation between us and God that God will stay away from us, where the enemies can control us and bring upon us great, great curses. So it's not because we don't serve God. It's not because we disobey God and angered God. It's because we served God for lack of joy. I think if I can apply it in today's world, number one, realizing you can't serve God without joy. It will not sustain itself, and God will reject it. But also in relationship, because as I shared with you, our relationship between spouses is a perfect 100% reflection of a relationship between us and God. If I have a very healthy relationship, but there is no joy, there is no relationship. You can't call it a relationship. So I may be there on time, and I be serving, and I be ironing, and I'll be there accompanying, we'll be there for each other, but joy is lacking, there is no relationship. It's dead. Literally, it's dead, and there are cracks, and it will be broken apart. Here is the way he explains that. I'm not going to go into the technicality, I'm just reading it to you, but it's this week's Torah portion, so it's very current. The verse reads, because you did not serve God with you, Lord, with joy and gladness of heart from an abundance of everything good. The simple meaning is, when you had an abundance of everything, you did not serve God with joy. This is the simple way. God has provided you, made you very wealthy, made you very happy, made you healthy, and yet you did not serve God with joy. It wasn't enough reasons to serve God with joy. This meaning is born out of the context of the following verse. You will serve your enemies in hunger, thirst, and nakedness, and in want of everything. But the Arizal interprets it thus: you did not serve God with joy greater than that caused by an abundance of everything. In other words, because God gave you so much, you were not happy. You did not serve God with joy. And therefore, God will take it away from you and say, now find me. We see from all the above the importance of serving God joyfully. Yet many things in one's life, both physical and spiritual, may cause him sadness. The Alter Rebbe now goes on to propose means of combating this sadness so that one may always be joyful. So until now, we discovered 3 points. 1, serving God must be done amidst joy. Without joy, there is no serving God. 2, sadness is part and parcel of our existence. In the calendar, there are days. In life cycles, there are events. However, in of itself, by them alone, there is no good, period. It is only that they will yield profit. They will bring outcome positive. The third part, the rabbi is saying, what's the profit that they will yield? Just like wisdom is beneficial only when it comes after foolishness, and light is beneficial only when it comes after darkness, so is joy after sadness of breaking the evil. That I am sad, why is it separating me from God? It will create a stronger bond between me and God, and therefore sadness leads to joy. This is so far what we have discovered. The question is how? After all, if somebody has a health condition, if someone has lost a close one, if someone got divorced, you can't expect them to be joyous. This is the next point the rabbi is going to make. I want to show it you an introduction. I am here, and it's for this week and next week. I'm here not to judge anybody. I'm here not to tell anybody what to do. I'm here not to tell you that one way is the right way. I'm here to teach you what the Rebbe shares, and I believe it's very powerful. I don't mean in anyone's on a personal level. And I want to share a personal experience that just happened to me. It's a very sad experience. But before, I want to show you a story.
Yeah.
So I don't get depressed, because it's very painful. It's a famous story. There was a rabbi by the name of Rabbi Berish Meislish. He was a rabbi of two large towns in Poland, Krakow and it could be Warsaw. But he was a very famous rabbi. God had helped him that not only was a very successful rabbi, very well known, very respected, but also very wealthy. He did very well financially. He was extremely wealthy. And how did he make his living? He used to lease entire forests and hire hundreds of men to cut the chopped trees. And then he would put them on rafts down a very big river, coming down to his town, and then he would sell the wood. So you would buy it at a wholesale. The forest, you will list the forest. You'll hire men who knew how to chop wood, and they would load it on rafts, and the rafts would flow naturally down a couple of days, I believe, till they reach his town, and then he would sell them. One day, there was a storm in that large river, and all of the produce got washed away and gone. Those rafts were a very risky business, because the rafts, they didn't have an engine, they didn't have a prediction about hurricanes coming, and they didn't know, probably there was few guards on each raft, 2-3 guards, loaded with wood, and it goes with the stream. If the stream change, if the current change, it goes in somewhere else and it's gone. It can be fallen apart. If there is a gushing storm, it breaks the rafts apart and the wood splatters all over. He actually lost all of his wealth, completely gone. Now, they didn't know how to share the news with him, because they were afraid what will happen when they share such bad news. So they were speaking to the wife, they were debating what to do. And one of the students, a very close student to the rabbi, told the wife and the committee, it was an unofficial committee, he can do it. He will be able to do it. So they accepted it, because they had no other way of sharing the news, breaking the news. When the rabbi was in synagogue one morning, the wife went upstairs to watch from the women's section. The student came to the rabbi and says, "Did you teach us in Tractate Brachot? In the Tractate Brachot, is it what we're going to be studying? It says that a man must bless God for a curse, the same as his blessing for a blessing. Do you remember teaching it to us?" And the rabbi said, "Of course." So what happens if something bad happens? And the rabbi says, of course, you have to thank God. You have to thank God for a blessing. You had a child, you thank God. You lost your house in a fire, you thank God. And the man says, and what if you had a real strong calamity? And the man says, the Gemara says you have to thank God and be joyous. It says you bless God. Bless is out of joy for a curse. Just like exactly the same as if it was a blessing. So of course you have to. So he turned to the rabbi and he says, what if a man had been amassed an enormous amount of wealth and he lost it all suddenly, completely, and he's now broken, he's probably going to be homeless. And the rabbi says, of course, he has to rejoice and say, thank you, God, just like he does for a curse, for a blessing. So the man turned to the rabbi and he says to him, well, maybe it's time for you to start dancing. So, and the rabbi fainted. So when they woke him up, they turned to him and says, what happened? He says, now this Talmudic statement is very difficult for me to understand. It's one of those complex statements that I don't understand. In other words, as long as he studied it philosophically, it's easy to say it. But when it's applying to me, now it's a very difficult to understand. It doesn't make sense to me. So I want to show you a personal experience. My sister just lost a son in the army, very well known in Israel, and very unusual child. I knew him from the moment he was born. And she lives in a village where I was born, a very small village called Kfar Chabad. So when he died, I traveled to Israel to be there with my sister, and she was very appreciative. My parents losing a grandson was also very difficult. So they were very appreciative. I was there for 7 days. I came back a month later. No, not a month later. 2 months later, 3 weeks ago, I traveled. There was a planned trip with Sarah and my son to go and celebrate before Bar Mitzvah with my grandparents. He didn't see his grandmother. So we went, even though I was in Israel already twice in 2 months. I was there in May, and then I was in the beginning of July. Now it's the middle of August. I'm going the 3rd time, but I'm happy to go, so I went. Comes Shabbat morning, I go to the mikveh. Now, the mikveh by men, did I tell you that anything you want to find out, you go to the mikveh and you find out? Mikveh is the best newsroom. You never heard that?
Absolutely.
The men's.
No, they go by themselves.
There is a famous story that illustrates that. President Bush wanted to know how come the Jewish people know everything that goes around the universe. So he was told that they go to the mikveh. They go to the mikveh. At the mikveh, they find everything all across the globe. So he said that he wanted to experience the same thing also. So they told them, get dressed like a religious Jew, a hat and jacket, and go to the mikveh. But you have to know 2 words in Yiddish. Vos is nayes. Vos is nayes is what's new. So you come to the mikveh, as you undress or you get dressed, you turn to the friend next to you and says, Vos is nayes. And then they will tell you everything you want to know. So he does, he disguises himself. He walks in, he pays the fee, he goes in, he hangs his towel, and he turned to the other guy and he says to him, Vos is nayes. And the friend says to him, you didn't hear? President Bush is in the mikveh.
So you
Okay.
go to the mikveh, what happens?
So I go to the mikveh. So in Kfar Chabad, when I go, there was only one. Now there are about 15. So I pick and choose the one where all my friends are. So in the neighborhood of my friends. So I go there to the mikveh in the morning. And as I walk in, somebody turned to me and he says, oh, I heard about all the breakfast you had on Thursday morning. we did a big party at the Kotel at the Western Wall, and right after, I hired a restaurant right there by the Kotel. It's amazing. It's in the tunnel. It's in a 2,500 years old structure. They made it a very nice restaurant. I rented the upstairs. So my family came, and after I went for breakfast. So I didn't advertise. Nobody should know. So a guy said, oh, I heard all about the breakfast that you had, how fancy it was. And he started telling me the type of eggs they served. So I said, how do you know? He says, don't you know? We know everything. Then so another guy turned to me and he says, so everybody is listening to the conversation. So another guy says, so you came for your son's simcha, because they understood. I said, yeah. And then they got quiet for a moment. So I said, well, you live here. Perhaps you can share with me about my sister. What do you know about my sister? I know my sister is very depressed. It's very painful. Even though she was in the news, she's interviewed by every television station, every radio. She's all over the country. At the Knesset, they spoke about her at least 10 times. The defense minister came for the unveiling, and he spoke later on about her. She's becoming a star. But after that, it's very painful. So I said to him, what can you tell me about my sister? So one of them, which actually is a very well-known rabbi in Israel, turned to me and says, I want to share with you the following story. And I think it's very important you asked. He told me some details about my sister, which I don't want to share here. But then he says, in Tel Aviv, which is a big city nearby, there was a famous Chabad rabbi who lost his daughter. He lost his daughter to cancer. And everybody was coming to comfort him. During the Shiva, there was a lot of visitors. And there was one man that seemed out of the group. He had no beard, and he looked like a modern Orthodox. He waited for everybody to leave except me, the rabbi speaking to me, and says, and the father and mother of the child. And when everybody left, he turned to the couple and he says, I came here to give condolences and comfort you. And the reason I'm speaking to you is I want you to know I also lost a child. And I think that I want to share with you that you be prepared that the pain of losing a child will never go away. You will never. So no matter, he says, it's great, people come, people feel sorry for you, people say, oh, I wish it didn't happen, and they showed love, but the pain will not go away. And in fact, with the time, it might even get bigger. So they thanked him. So he said, that's why I waited for everybody to leave. I didn't want to say it publicly, but I want you to be prepared. I speak to you of experience. And then he left. He felt that he did a mitzvah. The rabbi who shares in the mikveh tells me the story, said to me, I was shocked when I heard that. So when I came back to Kfar Chabad, to the village here, I went to a man who lost a child. And I said to him, you lost a child many years back, 20 years earlier. This is what I just heard. Is that true or not? And the father told me it is 100% true, but the only one who can say it is that father who actually lost a child. In other words, did you understand the point?
Yeah.
So not everything that's very true means that it can be shared by others. Only someone who himself experienced that pain can share that with a man or a person who lost a child. And I've taken from it a great deal. So that was his story. He just told it to me 3 weeks ago, that the pain is never going to go away. But to go and tell someone, you know, I know the pain is great, and because I deal with these situations like that all the time. It's not the right thing to do. Only someone who themselves walk the walk are able to talk the talk. And for somebody who did not experience, just to speak, it may be offensive. It may be very hurtful. I hope I made myself clear. Now, the reason I share that is because it's an introduction to what we're going to speak about. we're going to speak about different situations where a person is experiencing great pain, sadness, depression, either because they failed, either for chemical imbalance, either because events that took place beyond their control, either because of expectations, either because other people caused them to be in pain, etc. All that the Rebbe is going to address, that we need to realize that joy is an absolute necessity in all cases. But I just need you to know that I'm here not to judge anybody. I'm here not to tell anybody what to do. I'm just sharing the teaching of the Torah, and I'm speaking to myself. After having said that, we're going to start reading, but next week, you know what, let's stop here. Next week, we'll talk about how. And this is the discussion. All the introduction I share is about the how. How should we be able to deal with catastrophic events in our life and still remain happy? How is it possible? I think today more than ever, this is a question that it's on everyone's mind. And this is going to be the topic of next week. Thank you very much. Right.
Rabbi,
Yes.
so if I